Well, it's Friday. It's time for our editing and revising process. I've taken the liberty of moving my writing over to Google Docs because Google Docs is a more effective tool when editing text than Google Slides. Now, you might have already typed up your writing in Google Docs or you've written it out by hand, but either way, it is time for editing and revising process. We always start by reading our writing out loud and listening for where our sentences don't make sense. Let's do it. Kids these days don't know what it was like. The graphics, the controllers, the shiny N64 logo. It was all I wanted to do. GoldenEye was the game. I know all you can think about is Fortnite or Valorant or whatever the new hot game is. But in the 90s, James Bond GoldenEye was the greatest game I ever laid my pudgy hands on. So I'm just noticing this sentence is so long, it's so complicated. I wonder if I can simplify that for my reader. My parents were very concerned about the amount of time we three boys spent behind the television. Within days of my brother opening the shiny new console, we had a little white egg timer set to 20 minutes. For 20 glorious minutes, we were transported to a world of secret agents, of assassinations, and nail-biting violence. That's 20 minutes, I say, grinning with delight. Just let me finish the level, groaned my brother Mitch, desperate to spend every last second of his Saturday gaming. No way, I cry. You know what happened yesterday. I reach for the controller, but he easily pushes me away. The problem is Mitch is 3 years older than me. He's already in junior high. Fighting him is like fighting a wall. He just pushes me away, or worse, sits on me. Imagine an elephant deciding to plop its enormous behind on your chest. He's so heavy, I can't even breathe. So I've underlined a couple sentences. I also noticed some weird punctuation mistakes for when I actually edit my writing. Our second step is to read our writing to someone else. And we're going to take some time this week during our live sessions to listen to some reading and give some feedback. But if you do have someone at home, just make sure you give them a copy of our writing goals this year. You want specific feedback about things we're working on this year, like hooking my reader when they start my writing. Do I have interesting details? Am I using punctuation at the end of my sentences? Am I writing neatly? These are the kind of feedback that's really important for us to think about when we're getting feedback. Now that you've read your writing out loud to yourself, checking for those sentences, and you've gotten a little feedback from a peer, it is time for a 3-2-1 check. We've got 3 spelling, punctuation, or spacing corrections, 2 triple scoop words, and 1 sentence shakeup. Let's start with our spelling and our spacing punctuation mistakes. One of the first things I noticed is that in my dialogue, I had an extra set of quotation marks. So I'm going to make sure I get rid of those. Remember, our rule for dialogue is our quotation marks surround the sound. So the person speaking, just let me finish the level. That's the sound my brother is making. I want to make sure this is surrounded by those quotation marks. It is, but then I added quotation marks at the end. That's unnecessary. This is not the sound. The sound happens at the beginning of my sentence. Checking a couple other pieces of dialogue. That's 20 minutes. That's been surrounded by quotation marks. No way, I cry. You know what happened yesterday. So this is a little more complicated where I have 2 things I say, and in the middle is a description of what or how I'm saying it. No way. That's the sound. That's quotations. I cry. You know what happened yesterday. In quotations. That's another sound I make. So when we're doing dialogue, remember, surround the sound. Okay, I fixed a couple punctuation mistakes. There was a weird spelling mistake here. It says, GoldenEye was the greatest game I ever laid my pudgy hands on. And the suggestion is ever. I ever laid my pudgy hands on. Perfect. There's my second mistake. Is there any other mistakes that I made? I thought I saw a comma error. All I I know all you think about is Fortnite or Valorant, comma, or whatever the new hot game is. So let's add that comma there as well. Perfect. Now I've decided that using a highlighter is a little more obvious of where I'm doing my green editing. So if you use Google Docs, you can highlight the mistakes that you are fixing to make it nice and obvious for me. After my 3 spelling, punctuation, spacing corrections, I'm looking for triple scoop words. One of the places in dialogue you can check for triple scoop words is the description here. Say, groan, cry. These are the verbs I'm using to describe my character's speech. Say, groan, cry. Well, say is the simplest form. He said this, she said that. We can certainly improve on that with some triple scoop words. How do you say something with a little excitement? Well, something like exclaim, announce, proclaim, holler, chuckle. That's 20 minutes. I chuckle with delight. I want to give my reader the feeling that I'm very happy it's now my turn. So I'm going to change that to chuckle. Awesome. One more example of a triple scoop word. Glorious violence, assassinations, enormous behind. Fighting him is like fighting a wall. I think this is an example of a sentence that could use some more interesting words. Fighting him is like fighting a wall. Kind of boring. Fighting him is like banging your head against a wall. I'm trying to make it seem like it is fruitless. Fighting my brother is hopeless. Fighting him is like banging your head against a wall. There's no hope. Perfect. My final fix is my sentence shakeup, and I have this enormous one that's been laughing at me this entire day. Let's go ahead and think about how are we going to fix this enormous behemoth of a sentence so that it makes sense for my reader. I know all you can think about is Fortnite or Valorant or whatever the new hot game is. But in the 90s, James Bond GoldenEye was the greatest game I ever laid my pudgy hands on. Okay, it sounds like this is 2 different sentences. My first sentence is a list of all the cool games. Fortnite, Valorant, or whatever the new hot game is. So instead of a comma, I'm going to put a period there. And I'm going to try and make this sentence a little simpler. I know all you can think about is Fortnite, Valorant, or whatever the new hot game is. Capital on my new sentence. But in the 90s, GoldenEye was the greatest game I ever laid my pudgy hands on. Awesome. I've taken that enormous sentence, broken it up into 2 sentences, and it's a lot easier for my reader to understand. That's it for my writing this week. It's your turn. Now, it's obvious I didn't make all the corrections I needed to make, but I worked for those 10 to 15 minutes, and I'm going to leave my writing as is. If I want to come back to my writing another week, I can always come back and keep writing. I actually really like this idea, so perhaps next week I'll come back and I'll finish my story. I haven't even made it to my problem yet. Set that timer for 10 to 15 minutes and begin your editing and revising process.